Namaste and welcome everyone to listen Evenings with Sraddhalu. Namaste, Sraddhalu.
Namaste and happy to be with you all.
We are happy to continue today, part 8 on the series. But now we will be focusing entirely on the out-of-body experience and the methods for practice. And as usually, you may post questions in the chat box during our conversation, or send an email to integralstudies.in@gmail.com. And first, we will start with a few questions that we received already. And our first question from Aditya: how to avoid certain kinds of dreams? I have read Sri Aurobindo's letters where he says that one must put a will before going to sleep. But it doesn't always work for me, especially when I'm tired. There's some restlessness, or else I sleep later than 2 a.m.
Yes, I've included this question as part of the overall theme today because it also relates to our theme in a deeper way. So two of the things which we had recommended for all those who are interested in putting into practice and entering the out-of-body experience and developing the capacity and skill, two things that we had suggested as a preparation. One was the importance of the focus of concentration and the ability to hold concentration in a fixed way. And all of this goes back to the various sessions we've been discussing already. The second point was to start working on becoming conscious in the dream state, and in particular building the condition and the continuity of recall, that when you return from the dream state, as you wake up, you're able to maintain the thread and continue. A critical part of this kind of practice, or developing any particular direction of our capacities, skills, or experiences, including the deepest spiritual experiences, is this turning of our intention in a focus and even in an exclusive focus. And the question relates to just the question of putting a will before going to sleep, but this is a very important element. You want something to happen during sleep, but you're placing an intention when you're awake. You want this intention or this will to cross the barrier, to cross the veil and enter the sleep state so that things can happen there, which you intend here. So understand, you're dealing with two different spaces. Putting an intention in one space need not affect the other, unless you build the continuity, or unless you use a skill of how that intention will penetrate and enter the, in this case, sleep state or dream state. And so I want to use this question as a starting point for a certain aspect of this practice. Notice what happens when you have dreams which are mundane or reflections of your daily life, thoughts, emotions, fears, hopes, desires. The things which you repeat during the day tend to pop up at night and in dream state. So if during the day you have certain types of fears, those fears tend to repeat in the night. Even if in the daytime the fear is held subliminally, even if externally it is suppressed, and especially when something is suppressed in the waking state, it finds full reign, full freedom in the sleep state, when your will to suppress is no more active. So the key here is, what you do during daytime, persistently, repeatedly, habitually, and even mechanically, is what tends to slip into the dream state and rise up in the dream state. So one of the methods used in various kinds of methods which are taught for having out-of-body experience or just having a lucid dream or becoming conscious in dream state is, during the day, multiple times, just turn and look at your hands and become intensely aware of your hands, not mechanically, not your gaze passing through as you live in a half-sleep somnambulist state in your daytime. You look at your hands, become intensely aware, as intensely conscious as you can, observing the hands, and ask yourself, am I dreaming? I am becoming conscious. And you repeat this again and again and again during the day, as frequently as you like. So some people use an app or an alarm. Every time the alarm goes off, you do this. The result is, at night, in the dream state, this thing now which has gone into your subconscious or subliminal pops up. And in the dream, you mechanically do this, except that with this movement of seeing the hands, you have also intensified your awareness to become conscious and pull yourself out of this half sleep state in which we live our life. And so you as if become intensely conscious in the dream, and you say, oh, I'm dreaming, and you become conscious and lucid. It's a very simple exercise, but the persistent repetition in waking state is what leaks across into the dream state and does the thing which you want to happen in the dream state, which you've practiced in the waking state. So I'm pointing to this as an exercise which I would highly recommend for you to do. It's how I had my first conscious out-of-body experience many years ago when I was trying to get to that. I tried many other methods, and we'll discuss the limitations of other methods later. But this was one of the most effective at that point. But the point here is, what you do in daytime is what leaks through. So if, coming to Aditya's question, there are certain kinds of dreams, he has not mentioned what they are. Notice if there's a pattern in the daytime, correct it there. Put a will there for the correction. And the simple thing would be, let's say you find your emotions, thoughts, tendencies going in a certain direction, which is of the nature of what's coming in the dream you want to avoid. Instead of fighting it and suppressing it, you say, this is not what I want. What do I want? And slide from there to the state or experience that you want. Let's say you have some dreams which are distressing emotionally, or which involve some thoughts or passions that you want to avoid. The moment you find your mind or emotions going in that direction, you say, this is not what I want. What do I want? And slide. You don't jump. You don't push this down. You transform this, transmute this by sliding movement to the other state that you want. You find yourself in a low state of consciousness. You shift into a higher state and shift to the state you want. This sliding movement you make a habit, again and again and again repeating. The result will be, you will find in a few days, typically 3 to 4 days, in the dream state, you'll find as that tendency occurs, in the dream state your consciousness will shift and slide into the other state. Very simple. So the act of putting an intention or putting a will can be done just before sleeping. It has a certain value. But it is much more useful if it is sustained during the day for a specific purpose that you want during the night. And we will see how this becomes important for the out-of-body experience as we come to that issue a little later. We'll cover a few more questions before we come to that part. But it should be obvious now that holding an intention during the day, a one-pointed focus, intention, sense of purpose, this I want, or this I am becoming, whatever it is, repeated, until you are literally suffused with this aspiration, intention, will, and that pops up in the night or in the dream state. Now, this is exactly the same method you would use also for entering into certain states of consciousness or certain experiences of the deeper kind. In fact, to share a very personal experience, at some point when I was going through a severe crisis, I said to myself, of course this has only one solution, and that is to realize the psychic being. And I remembered mother saying that it took her so many months, etc., and she held that intention for so many months. That was, of course, for the body's consciousness. I was aiming for something much simpler. And I said to myself, I have to do this. Whatever happens, all else is irrelevant. This is alone important, even if I die trying. And I've mentioned this before. Why did this thought come? Why? Even if I die trying. The important thing was, the dying was, of course, of the ego. If you meet your psychic being, obviously the ego automatically loses its centrality. And that was the part which had the fear, I might So I put myself into this and repeated again and again. The build-up took days, weeks. I think I did it for about 1 month in a very sustained way, that every now and then it had become a habit. In the middle of some activity, I would pause, remember this, and put myself in relation to the deepest aspiration I could reach at that moment, and the intention to realize, to know, to enter in closeness with the psychic being, and so on. It went on for about 1 month of intense concentration, and just after, I was in a concentrated retreat. So I was with a group, but it was sustained now with a full focus, because there was nothing else to do except this one focus. And on the third day, I had the radical experience which I was looking for, which at least established a firm contact with the presence. So it's not difficult. It needs that persistence, and it needs that one-pointedness and overwhelming priority that one gives to it, whatever be the thing you want to have, spiritually or even at an occult level on a capacity like this. So coming back to Aditya's question, yes, you can put a will just before going to sleep, but in this case, because you have a persistent pattern of dream, make the shift in daytime in the way I've suggested. But also understand that when you put a will just before going to sleep, there is a way to do it. The nature of this will is not a state of tension and pushing, I want, it must be. That never works. It's rather a relaxed state of turning in intention, intending for this with a one-pointedness of focus, but with no stress or strain. Such a will held as you slide into sleep will actually continue into the deeper layers and impact the dreams or whatever else you choose in the way you intend. So the simple answer to Aditya's question is, do it this way, without the stress and tension. Slide the intention into the sleep state. But the more detailed answer would be, change the form in the daytime, and then you'll have a much longer lasting, deeper impact on what you want to change. We can go to the next question.
Victor, after long meditations, there are double vortex-like energy formations, and the focus of consciousness seems to go higher somehow. Is that the normal out of body as a normal consequence of the 5 senses unified into presence?
So this was, I think, in relation to the question, to the text we were reading last time, and I want to make a very clear distinction between what we are describing as a conscious out-of-body experience from the various other kinds of experiences which may have similar effects, which are described by Sri Aurobindo in the text that we read last time, but do not represent this conscious out-of-body experience. And how would you distinguish? There are others also who have sent questions regarding certain experiences they had of finding themselves floating above the head, or finding themselves wandering as if in some spaces, in some locations and so on, or finding themselves floating and seeing beautiful sceneries. Is that an out-of-body experience? Well, since the word out-of-body is very generic, one could call anything out-of-body if you felt yourself out. But what we mean here by conscious out-of-body experience in your vital body, in your subtle body, is very specific. And I will read from 2 texts. I will share one text and read from the other text. The first is something which Marc shared with me. He was in a personal conversation. He was speaking of how somebody in France used to relate to out-of-body experiences, or call out-of-body experiences what was merely a projection of consciousness. He had mentioned the name, I don't recall now. So this person used to be able to project as if a thread of the consciousness out of the body, extend it a great distance. For example, he would extend it and see whether they had enough stock of bread in the bakery nearby. After seeing what they had, he would go and buy it. And of course, Marc himself says that he developed that skill also. And he gave one example. He said at one point, he was finding himself flying over mountains, and I think it was the Himalayas, I don't remember. And as he's flying, the whole experience is so vivid. He's seeing everything, experiencing everything through all the senses, exactly as if out of body, in the subtle body. But he said, because I knew what it was like being in the subtle body, I knew this was not it. But I could not distinguish from the experience itself what was the difference. And then he says something very interesting. He says, at that point, since he was aware it was not a real subtle body, out of body experience, he said he decided to go out of the body at that moment. And then suddenly found himself in a double awareness. Here was this tip of the consciousness projected out, which was experiencing things. And at the same time, at his home, his subtle body separated from the physical body. And he was aware of his room in the subtle body. And this he shared as an experience to highlight the distinction between the two things. And of course, at that point, he could straight away move the subtle body to where he was in the other point. But he explained that there's a particular, it's like a filament of consciousness pushed out, which you can take to a great distance. You will remember this is exactly what Sri Aurobindo described in the text we were reading last time, among other experiences. But that can be so vivid as to give you the conviction that you're out of body in a subtle body. So to make this distinction in a very public meeting, in a conference where that man was speaking about having out-of-body experiences, Marc took the stage and asked him two questions. And this is our reference hereafter for whether it's out of body. He said, when you are out of the body in this way, can you look at your own subtle body? And the man said, no, I don't have a body. The second question Marc asked, can you feel, see, hold your silver cord, which is behind the head? And the man said, no, I don't have a silver cord. So Marc said, this is not technically then out of body experience. Now, of course, one can play with words. You can define out of body as straddling all these variations of experience. No, but at least for our purpose, we will use this term very specifically. Exteriorization or out of body experience in the subtle body is what we will call that. So to Victor's question, very simply, no, that's not it, although it may involve a certain shift in consciousness, a floating of some part of your consciousness, a separation of a part, a projection of a part, or many of the experiences which we discussed last time. But it's not going out of the body in the subtle body. I'm going to read from another text which is from written by Geminous in an email. He wrote this. There is a huge difference in witnessing this vital body while it is in the physical body as opposed to being free of the physical body. When it is free of the physical, it shines brightly with all kinds of colored lights, much like the cover drawing on Marc's book. It is utterly spectacular. In the many hundreds of people I have facilitated in going consciously out of body, the witnessing of their vital body out of the physical completely eradicates any fear of the death of the physical and any doubt of the existence of the divine, of immortality, of eternity, etc. It is a revelation very worthy of experiencing. So for those who have not seen Marc's book cover, I think this would give you an idea of what it looks like. But you can go to the website deeptipublications.com where you can see the cover perhaps in better, closer, enlarged version. But I remember also meeting one of Marc's students who had a large number of experiences. And she said this, the first time when she was out of the body, she looked at her hand and she found it so beautiful. She was mesmerized and kept staring at it for a very long time. Well, such is the glimpse of beauty that one can have of the subtle body. So, very simple test we all have. If you are out of the body, well, look at your own body, feel or see, because you don't have to turn with your eyes, you can see all around. You see that you have a silver cord, and that's how you know you're formally in the subtle body. And of course, once the experience becomes normal, the question itself would not be an issue. So this is in response to question from Victor. We go to the next question. Yes.
Quartz. What if we move out and some other entity enters? What if some other entity enters while one is in our...
Yes. So when you're out, the fear that some other entity might enter is very simply answered. You are never out entirely. It is your subtle body, your vital body, which is out. All the rest of you is still very much connected, present, and there are many layers, and there's a continual link between the two. And as long as this link is intact, and as long as there is a presence in the body, they cannot take over. Unless, and this is a very rare case, if you do a very special kind of exteriorization where the bulk of your consciousness goes out and you are in a cataleptic state, which can be also dangerous to the physical body. But even to get to that requires a very highly developed skill, and most people would not be able to do that easily. But that being said, remember also that supporting all this is your deeper self, or to use Aurobindo's vocabulary, the central being. It is ever vigilant. It chooses. It has in full control the experience of separation outside the body, as well as the intelligence and the necessary capacity to bring back to integration whenever required. And this is in fact the experience of most people. If at any point there is some disturbance or some danger to the physical body, automatically you are pulled back and you rejoin. And it can even be very subtle, somebody approaching, and the perception or sensation in the part of the consciousness which is in the physical body that there is somebody approaching is enough sometimes even to compel the subtle body to be pulled back. One of the things you will find Marc describing in his book is that when he is pulled back, in the middle of some experience which he wants to stay on with, he finds this silver cord pulling him. He tries to resist. And the power of that is so great it can overwhelm him. He is inevitably pulled back. It's a very interesting passage in the book you will find. And one has to ask simply, who is deciding? Who had this tremendous power to pull you back against all of your trained conscious will and intention? Or I would put it another way, who is the person who allowed you to go out and who is now saying enough and forcing you to come back? Who even, I will say, who made you go out and brought you back, who has such a power that you have no say in it. And there's one experience he describes in the book when he forced himself against everything to stay on when the silver cord was pulling back. First, it pulled very hard, but with his full will when he stayed on, at some point he said he found his subtle body as if disintegrating and falling apart. And then he was pulled into a swoon and forcibly taken back. So the one who decides that you have to go back is also the one who can decide that you can go out. Why is this important? We will come to this shortly. In the practice, it's not you who will decide, but that which is truly you which will decide. And it is under its influence, under its guidance, under its decision that all this can be done very easily, spontaneously, and safely. So that part and the relation to that we will discuss when we come to the actual process and the practice we will follow. So I think that answers Quartz's question. Unless you are in a very sick condition of health, or you are in that very specialized exteriorization where the bulk of your consciousness has left the physical body, there is practically no danger. One would say it is as dangerous or as safe as your nocturnal separation of the subtle body that takes place during sleep in any case. Only now you will be conscious and you will be able to act consciously. We can go to the next question. Oh, I think Alina has lost the link. Okay, so the next question is from Luke, question which we had read last time, but I will repeat. Since there's an infinite number of, or a continuity of consciousness across so many bodies, are there an infinite number of subtle bodies? Is it 3 bodies? Is it 7 bodies? Is it 12 bodies, as Mother describes leaving 12 bodies, and so on? So generally, you have to understand it this way, There is a continuity of consciousness and an infinity therefore of gradations. But broadly 7 planes, and each plane based on a principle of consciousness. So 7 principles make for 7 planes, but each being in each makes for 49, but 49 descending, 49 ascending makes for the 100 of the Veda, etc. But planes basically you would speak of as 7, or the subplanes being 49, or within each, in some traditions they will say there are further 7, so 7 into 7 into 7. But at some point you realize that distinction becomes irrelevant, since it is a continuum. But what about our bodies? So there's a continuum of reality, but our bodies in the yoga tradition are described as 5: physical, vital, mental, and the other 2 which are supramental and the bliss body of the Satchidananda. Of those 2, of course, we have not developed consciousness in, but these 3 we have consciousness of. But these 3 are generally tightly bound in the physical, and so we rarely experience the other 2 separately, which can happen in dream state. And the separation in the subtle body then is the experience typically in the vital body, and in some cases one can develop or train to go out in the mental body. And so this is the common range of experience that we have. Luke's next question is, when a human being dies, or an animal or a plant, does each of his subtle bodies wander in their corresponding plane? Do they all end up dissolving themselves in each plane? Does the psychic being immediately no longer dwell on these subtle bodies? Yes, some of it yes, some of it no. The way Sri Aurobindo describes this is during the separation after the physical body has been shed. Well, to put that in context, when you separate, there is always a link. If you disconnect the link, well, the physical body then has no more the sustenance and nourishment, and then it begins to decline and degenerate and, well, die. But when that happens, the other layers in the subtle body also, there are many gradations of consciousness which we have built, integrated. Much of it is not sufficiently individualized. So the portions which are not too individualized tend to dissipate as the psychic being withdraws from those layers. So it is that which holds everything together. As it chooses to withdraw, those layers as if break down at their own levels. So in some of the traditions they describe how certain gradations corresponding to certain vibrations in nature often go and wander off into those parts of nature. So particularly there's a layer of the vital physical which is very close to the tree consciousness, and it tends to aggregate, or if there are lumps of it around, it tends to fuse into the tree or join with the tree and merges in that grade very close to the physical consciousness, and so on. As you withdraw, the layers being shed, sometimes if they have strong individualized desires, those lumps of desire bundles can stay on, hang around for a while, which may be seen as ghosts or as just forces which hang around something to which you're attached. The person may not be present, or in very rare cases, the psychic being may withdraw and leave behind a layer which does not fully decompose. Or it can continue to draw nourishment from things to maintain its independence. It's like a shell, like a mechanical shell. So many things are possible. There's a whole range of possibilities. And in many of the, unfortunately not nice thing to talk about, in some of the old cultures which used animal sacrifice and all that, they would use these layers or shells for specific purposes, sometimes magical intentions, vehicles, etc. So yes, there is a truth that things dissolve on their planes, but it can take time. It does not happen immediately. Sometimes it can happen even over a very long time if the person is stuck in some intermediate layers in the planes. Marc describes in his book somebody who was 20 years stuck in the layer very close to the physical because I think she had committed suicide and had not yet managed to get free from that. And that's an interesting description you might want to look at. But yes, in principle, one can hang around in between. It's not a very nice state. But much depends on your spiritual evolution. If there has been sufficient awakening spiritually, if there is a clear aspiration and relation with the divine, then all of these issues can be avoided, and at the time of exit from the physical body, if the mind turns towards the divine, you have immediately from the other side the help that comes, a link formed, and you're taken across these intermediate ranges easily without difficulty. We can go to
I'm
the...
back, yes.
Yes, okay.
I
So
was a
Luke's
bit-
question number 3, if you can look at.
Number 3, okay.
Yes.
When someone meets a deceased person by occult means, for example, visions, projection of consciousness, exteriorization, is it actually that they just meet one of the person's subtle bodies in the very plane where the experience occurs and not the true self of the person? For example, his or her psychic being.
Yes, more often than not, this is what happens. When you go out of the body, you see somebody who has passed on, then you're meeting them in their vital body, which is still where they're still dwelling. You may not perceive their psychic presence. They themselves may not perceive their psychic being unless you already have a deeper sensitivity and awareness of the psychic, in which case you would perceive the deeper layers corresponding to your own development and your capacity to perceive. But more often than not, it's just your vital meeting somebody else's vital. So again, there a lot of variations are possible. You might be meeting not the person's vital body, but a shadow or a reflection of that person's consciousness, which is hanging around like an image. So the person may have withdrawn, but a strong image remains. There are many variations possible. There is an imprint left in the Akashic records, which in certain states of consciousness you might be able to see, feel, and interact with as if it's a living person, though the person has reincarnated. And that's another kind of experience. There's also the experience where some other being can take on that form, because form being plastic in those states, whatever you choose to, literally instantly you shape yourself to take on whatever form you like. And so if you meet a vital being that looks into your mind, picks out the form that you expect, with which you want to meet some spiritual preceptor, they can take on that form and come to you and say, here I am. How would you know? If you live only in a superficial layer of consciousness, you could not know. If you have a deeper sensitivity, you would immediately feel something is wrong. This is not the vibe of the person. So even on a physical level, if someone imitates, you feel it can't be this person. The vibe is wrong. Over there, where the physical body is no more dulling you, that experience can be even more sharp. But if you have, even then, one can be quite cleverly deceived. If the person can even shift the vibes to create an appearance using a fake layer of vibes. And all these are possible. Only if you have the deeper psychic discrimination that you will see through or sense through and know. And the mother gives this example. At one point she said Sri Aurobindo came to her, or it seemed as if Sri Aurobindo came to her in the subtle form and was giving instructions, and she was listening intently, and then something said, no, this is not it, there's some mixture here. And then she looked and she found the feet of the being were warped, and immediately she recognized that one of these, asuric beings had taken on that form and was trying to deceive her. So just to say that form is never a reference. So you might meet things, see things in form, but it does not mean too much in itself unless you have a deeper discrimination which can see through to what is actually happening or what is the reality. But yes, many experiences are possible and many variations to these experiences. You can meet somebody's psychic being if you are conscious in the deeper ranges of your psychic consciousness. And then it is possible to actually go into the psychic world and meet in that world or experience things in that world. And that is a very different grade of experience. But still, all this would require you to have already developed a certain capacity and familiarity with the psychic consciousness or presence. So this is one question which used to bother me. Is it limited to that? And I discussed in one of the sessions, perhaps last time or the time before, that it's possible also you can get help from the divine consciousness, your own self. You can be given an experience of a range which is not yet developed fully in you, and then that becomes a reference in itself for you to rebuild or develop that consciousness. You can go to the next question.
So on part number 4, Is asking, when someone like the mother or Marc O'Byrne, for instance, meets a being, even a god, by occult means, is this being actually just a subtle body living only in the corresponding plane? Or is it a being having subtle bodies in multiple planes?
It could be any. It depends on the beings also. And actually, the reality is much more complex. As you go higher up, if you go into the higher ranges corresponding to the overmental beings, they may have multiple bodies projected, and some of them may have emanations, so to say, in multiple bodies all the way to the physical. So, what are you meeting? You're, so to say, meeting the higher central or being from whom all those emanations have come. I remember reading the mother describing this when she met the Asuric, one of the Asuric beings. Let me see if I have the text, because yes, okay. So mother speaks of this when she met one of these. She met with this being which is in the human world called Satan. But she said, with Satan, it was the central being, of course, what she met. He had millions of emanations in the world, and this was the central being in person. Okay, this is mother's comment. Millions of emanation. Think about what that means. And emanation does not mean that the person is fully that being. It could also be an emanation that aligns to an existing, evolving human being. So what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? A lot depends on then on your capacity even to perceive and to be aware of all these things. So this is just to give a glimpse that reality is far more complex than the tendency we have to reduce to our physical experience. Go to the next question.
Are terrestrial beings, including animals and plants, the only ones in the cosmos having several bodies?
No, and as we saw last time in the text of Sri Aurobindo, even physical objects can have corresponding subtle gradations attached to them or even forming them. And of course, some of this can be then influenced by human beings. So if you take an object which you use frequently and you hold, for example, a mobile phone, because we hold it all the time and it's suffused with our consciousness, actually has built up a gradation of substance of your consciousness attached to it, which forms, so to say, its own subtler gradations. How much depends, of course, on what is put. So even it's possible if somebody with a very strong and densified spiritual consciousness uses it, you may feel that grade of spiritual vibration in the physical object. Interesting. But yes, animals and plants would have these gradations evolved or partly involved and evolved. Limited to their range of evolution. So in the plants it would go up to a certain grade. There will be a corresponding layer corresponding to the mind and even things higher, but not so organized, but not so distinguished. And often on those layers it may be a collective consciousness. So a plant being primarily of the vital ranges very close to the physical, its, let's say, mental consciousness may actually spread over several plants. It may have an individualized, so to say, plant king individuality, which may particularly align to a particular plant. And so you would say that plant is the king of this, which is its family. But that's the way we translate the experience. If for some reason that main tree is cut, then that whole thing could withdraw and the entire cluster of trees might die, or that thing may shift the focus to another tree, which would now become the king and acquire the force and individuality corresponding to that presiding presence. Or at still higher levels, it could be into a much broader species kind of consciousness, and so on. So a lot of possibilities there also. Next question.
When the presence of a rishi or Sri Aurobindo or the mother can be felt in different places, is it just the presence of one of her subtle bodies, or that of their complete true self, wearing the image of their last incarnation? How can this happen in multiple places simultaneously? How technically can a presence find itself apparently dimmed because of the lack of respect of people around? He's asking.
Okay. So you see, all of these questions are coming from a perspective in which you have reduced consciousness to the containing form, which is true only of the physical world. In the physical body, you find your consciousness as if bound and as if even formed by the container of the physical body. So it feels. I recall reading and then seeing a video from Dr. Raymond Moody's interviews with people who had near-death experiences. And there was this one person who commented it in this way. He said, once he was out of the physical body, he felt his consciousness was everywhere at the same time. And he mentioned several cities across the world. I was everywhere at the same time, but there was a special focus here in the region where the physical body was. That's all. So here's an example of what it could be like when your consciousness is freed from narrow states. Now, that particular experience corresponded to his evolution. It may not be the same for everybody. But if you are sufficiently evolved, your consciousness can be as large as the world. It can even be as large, conterminous with the universe, is the phrase Sri Aurobindo uses. That is terminating with the same boundaries as the universe, which of course is boundaryless. So you can be wide and therefore present everywhere. In your larger consciousness, you are conscious of everything everywhere at the same time. In your total consciousness, you may choose to focus on one or another or more or 1,000 or 1,000,000 or any number simultaneously, entirely. And this is the nature of that consciousness itself. Unlike our mind consciousness, which can focus on one thing or another, or split half and half between two, in which case it's in neither fully, which is the limitation of mind consciousness that is finite. When you shift into the higher spiritual ranges, you are spontaneously, simultaneously, effortlessly, everywhere, entirely. Which, incidentally, is the nature of the self. The self is not more here, less there. It is equally everywhere, and it is at the same time in oneness. It is the same one self here and there and everywhere. Rather, here and there, the separation are just relationship it sets with itself in its freedom. So as you approach consciousness of self, such a state becomes more and more the norm. I think just with this, all the fine points of your question are answered, but still we can elaborate a little bit. So if you meet Sri Aurobindo and the mother, if your focus is on meeting them in form, then yes, you could see them in subtle form, or you could see reflected in your perceiving consciousness the form that you are familiar with, while they might be free of that form and in a larger, freer consciousness. Or they could put forward a certain projection of an aspect of their consciousness for the purpose of this interaction, or so many variations. And it could be any of these. But generally what happens, and this is why I encourage you to hold the relationship with the divine and those who represent for you the divine, in this case Sri Aurobindo and the mother, in a state of pure, direct intimacy of consciousness, not bound to form. You may still conceive of forms, face, etc., but do not limit to that. For example, if you conceive of the mother purely in this particular form of body that you see in the photograph, you may not recognize the fact that she comes to you in her subtle body, which is not of that, which is much more young, plastic, and could be of an aspect which is not so common in the photograph. But then you will still know, yes, this is her. Or depending on the level where you perceive, also there can be an aspect which is more highlighted and so on. So rather than fixating on that, concentrate on the quality of her presence, and to whatever extent you feel the presence, widen out to the largeness of her presence without limiting to form. Now it may happen that in the perception of her vast cosmic presence, you have overlaid as if an aspect or form or image or even a face. But the face is as if just a representation of that which is beyond all. And that face is real. It's not just your imagination. It's a real form of that which is beyond form. You will remember the line in Savitri, which goes something like this, when he describes Savitri meeting the Supreme Lord, and all worshipped forms were in him. Something like that. Sorry, I don't have the exact words. But in the very glimpse of that form that you had, you could feel, see, sense all other forms simultaneously present in that form. Or such is the nature of the perception in those states. Unlike the physical world where form is rigid, here you may experience simultaneously all the forms, all the ages, all the variations in a single form, and each distinctly perceived though simultaneously. So there are many variations to this kind of experience, and it is all natural to these states of consciousness. So simply becoming aware or awakening into these states, and you have the perceptions changed so much that everything you're familiar with here loses value or is seen to be such a pale reflection. So how can it happen to multiple places simultaneously? Yes, because they're equally present everywhere. The self is equally everywhere. So now the question is, how can the presence be felt dimmed? And there you may use an analogy, and it's only an analogy. If you see like a cloud floating above, you can see it, feel it perhaps. But if the cloud densifies and lowers down and infuses you, then you'd be as if in it, surrounded by it, tangibly in contact. But if the air warmed, the cloud would again slowly drift off. You would still feel it, but with a gap. This is just an analogy, but something like this, the presence is felt, as I said, the self being everywhere. At any point one may densify as if the presence. Often this is done with the help of a human being, or it is done by the human being, by the fact of being aware of the self. Just the fact that I am aware would, so to say, offer the presence a passage all the way down to a denser material grade. If a person is in a deep state of concentration and immersion in the self, because the person is in the consciousness all the way to the body, it's like a bridge, bringing and densifying the presence all the way to the physical. And so walking by near this person, you would feel, there's something here. You don't know what it is, but you feel that something. Or, if it's not in the physical body, an individual can, so to say, bring the presence down and fix it on a material level. This is what the mother said. She said, build the Matre Mandir and I take it upon myself to make it one of the most powerful spiritual centers in the world. She has done that from the other side. You don't need to be physically present. So you can push from that side, you can draw from here, but fixing it in the physical space. Of course, you can do things here to evict it also. But otherwise, if you don't interfere, it can stay fixed depending on what kind of person or what means it has, to what degree it has been fixed. But something else. The presence itself can choose to densify and materialize much more. Such would be the case for certain beings who may choose to approach the physical domain, wander around for a while, and then withdraw. And you'll find a description of this in Marc's book. You will remember when he's going in the train journey, and then this presence comes and wanders through the train, and suddenly everybody begins to smile and they behave differently, and then it goes away after a while, and they all fall back into their usual state. So again, many variations to this, and we'll take his last question.
How technically can the divine presence find itself amplified during a spiritual retreat, for example, since it is always everywhere at any time, but just often poorly received due to a lack of conscience, concentration, receptivity?
Yes. So it's the same thing which we just discussed in the previous question, but to this I will add one more point. When an individual or a group of individuals sit in aspiration, opening, invoking, inviting, receiving, the divine presence, as you say, is everywhere anyway. It immediately, instantly responds and fills your cup. If you're an individual or as a collective, the cup is filled immediately. How much, to what extent, how densely, how large, what quality, depends on its freedom and also your call, and a combination of the two. But always when there is a call, aspiration, prayer, whatever form it takes, instantly there is a response. Now, depending on your readiness, it may manifest to various degrees. Depending on its freedom, it may choose to give you much more than your readiness, though you may not be able to hold. And so on, many variations possible. But again, it's complete freedom on both sides which is involved. So the presence is amplified simply because it is like this. Now, I had a very interesting experience I've perhaps mentioned here. There are a few places where I had gone for some programs, and particularly where we had done a concentrated meditation retreat. And these were regular hotels where everything is mixed every day. And we came back to the same place after a gap of 1 year or 2 years. Entering the room, one could feel as if the presence was still imprinted as if just above. And all you had to do was to create the space and invoke it, and boof, it was just there. Very interesting. It had not fully gone. And I had one more experience. This was in France, in a place, again it was for something like this. And we had gone to a place, as it turned out, it was not the best place. It was in the basement of a hotel where they used to have weddings. And entering the place, it was cold, damp, heavy, dull, dark presence. Not very encouraging. So we set up the place. We placed the photographs of the mother and Sri Aurobindo, and then all those of us who were there arranging, we sat down and concentrated and invoked. And within a few minutes, you could feel the presence beginning to fill. And I think by the time we started, let's say the first less than 24 hours had passed, and the owner of the hotel had to come down for there was some issue, and so she was called. And as she opened the door to come down the stairs, she opened the door, suddenly she was thrown back and said, "Wow, it feels like a temple." She was very sensitive, but she could feel that immediately, and it had such an intensity. So after it was all over, I said, it's not fair to allow it to stay. It would be desecrated. You feel a sacred presence. So we literally prayed and said, okay, now thank you. Now you can go back. And within a few minutes, 3, 4, 5 minutes, not more, the presence was gone. It was back to that dingy, damp, dark vibration of that space. Fascinating. And it's amazing. When you see this happen, you realize what a grace with which the divine pours into you. All you have to do is simply ask. And the Divine Mother, the Divine Consciousness, the Divine Presence is always there, ready to give you everything. So prepare your container, open and ask and receive and hold. That's all that's required really to do so much. We go to the last question, which will be perhaps the most important for our topic today. Okay, Alina seems to be disconnected. So Kiara's question, it's a bit longish, but Kiara is asking some questions about the VELO practice, VELO, which is voluntary energetic longitudinal oscillation. This we'll speak about it shortly. About this practice. First, if doing this before bed, is it preferable to do this sitting up or lying on one's back? Second, Nancy Trivelato, who gave this name to this form of practice, talks about creating longitudinal waves from head to feet and feet to head. Could you also create lateral waves from side to side and front and back? Third, could you start with a descent of peace meditation, reaching out above and beyond the physical body, then initiate the waves within the confines of the body? Fourth, what about the arms? Would you do this in separate waves or simply let this happen as part of the longitudinal movement from head to feet? Last, he says, I have been practicing Vipassana meditation as taught by Goenka for many years. I find overwhelming similarities between these two practices. And he speaks of the 10-day Vipassana retreats. Would that help with the VELO technique? And in the videos, she speaks of vibrational state and energy resonance. Is this a link between the two practices of the Buddhist Vipassana and this? So there are many things to comment, and I'm going to use this generally as a starting point for the practice that would be we would take up for having an out-of-body experience. So first, this velo method is a way of becoming conscious of the subtle body and in the subtle body, but also intensifying the awareness and at the same time building continuity from your physical waking state to the subtle body state. So as a practice, it is extremely helpful, but there are other things which we will do, which we will discuss shortly. But let's just talk about this velo exercise. The exercise itself is described in this way by those who promote it, the IAC particularly, International Association for Consciousness, I think. The way they describe it, and the lady who named this particular form of practice, Nancy, they describe it as an energetic method and a spiritual practice, etc., etc. I'm going to cut through all that clutter, which is a very mixed understanding of it, and go to the thing as I would describe it from the perspective of the integral yoga. So primarily the exercise is one of an energetic exercise. It has in itself nothing to do with spiritual experience, but it is linking you to your subtle body. You can of course bring into it a spiritual dimension, but that is not intended, nor is it present in the way they describe it. But the exercise is very simple, and rather than going into the whole complex form in which they do it, I will simplify it to what is relevant for our practice for the out-of-body experience. Basically, the practice involves becoming aware like a disk of energy, let's say above the head, and then feeling the energy move through the head as a sensation, energetic sensation, layer by layer, all the way down through the arms, torso, etc., all the way down to the feet, and then from the feet again going back all the way up the head, and then going back down and up and down and up. So initially you do it very slowly, and then you speed it up until you go quite fast repeatedly. Now you can see the exercise itself is not to be done as a visualization. It's not picturing something, it's feeling it energetically. So you can feel like a warm sensation, energetic sensation, heat, in whatever way you feel energy, and slowly bring it down and feel the penetration, feel it extending beyond, etc. Part by part, slowly go all the way to the feet and back up. Now, for those of you who have already done the exercise of the guided meditation for descent of peace, you will recognize something which is similar but not the same. There the experience is not energetic. It is not one of vital energy. It is of a deep, dense presence of peace that settles in and literally like a liquid fills you, surrounds you, and fills you and makes you conscious of your subtle body. So the approaches are slightly different, but the common feature I will point to, and then you will see how you can use this for the purpose. If you're using the descent of peace meditation, the velo exercise can blend into it for this end. So if you're conscious of the peace that fills you and you feel it extending around, and you feel the boundaries of your subtle body swollen around you, then you simply start with that. Become conscious of your subtle body and intensely aware, and let that awareness, so to say, slide down all the way to the feet and back and up and down. So here you have already shifted attention, not so much at an energetic level, but already on the awareness of your subtle body. Perhaps initially subtle physical, but as you concentrate and move in this way, the nature of the exercise, etc., will bring and intensify the awareness and sensation in the vital body in particular. And so this I would suggest as the easiest way, because with this you are focusing directly in and on the vital body awareness, intensifying it and making it more complete. But if you don't want to do this, you follow the velo method the way it's taught. The way they will tell you is you do this up and down many times, and you keep doing this regularly, and with it gradually you will experience the subtler layers, etc. So I'm skipping the gradual process. I'm trying to get you to the direct method immediately. Become aware of the subtle body and then do this velo exercise on it to intensify and particularly become conscious of the vital grade. So this would be the easiest and most direct way. Initially you do slowly, and then as you feel it becoming more and more continuous, you speed it up and then speed it up and go back and forth rapidly. At some point you'll find the entire awareness buzzing as if, intensifying. And then you let that movement of intensifying take over. This movement up and down almost becomes irrelevant. Or if needed, you can use it once in a while to reactivate the movement, but then follow the intensification and the buzzing, tingling sensation that it builds. And at that point, you are no more in the descent of peace practice, which is of a different goal. It is meant to connect you to the presence of the self. Whereas here you are much more in the vital body and maybe some part of the subtle physical. Doesn't matter, here the intention is different now. And you use that. At which point, what Chiara asks about lateral waves, front and back, yes, why not? You can do all that to help build. But the moment you build this and you're aware of the intensification, allow the intensification now to amplify. So you could start with the descent of peace meditation, as Chiara suggests, and then from there build this practice, which will then shift the awareness much more into the vital body, and it changes the direction of the descent of peace, but still it's an entry point and it is very effective as an entry point. You can literally skip years of effort directly with the descent of peace. I remember when I was in Europe in one of the conferences of the European Yoga Union, and we did this practice with a group, and one of the persons afterwards came and he said that he was a martial arts teacher also, and he would do every day intense martial arts so that at the end of this 2 hours of intense exercise, he would feel the swelling up of the subtle body, the subtle physical, and feel good in it. But it took him 2 hours to get to that. And then he said, but here we just went up and down and hop, it was there. Yes, it is actually, it can be, and it is as simple as this. But once you have this, then you can work using this as the starting point for the velo exercise. And then very quickly, in a very short time, you can get to the point where you're conscious of the subtle body as a distinct thing in itself. I'll come to this now when we come to the rest of the practice, but I'll complete the question. About the arms, you don't do separate waves, you have the same one longitudinal movement going there. But you can also focus on certain parts and go up and down if you find that useful. But the intention is to build awareness to the whole. So if you want, you do that in the arms or fingers initially to build awareness. Once you've done that, the focus should be on the whole, to bring yourself into whole awareness of the subtle body as quickly as possible, as completely as possible, to the point where you do not feel your gross physical body anymore and you're entirely in that awareness. That should be the goal. Regarding the link with Vipassana, there's a very big difference and we should be careful. Vipassana focuses principally, at first at least, on sensations of the physical body and then emotions and thoughts, with the intention of separating from it. But the very nature of the process fixates you in the physical body. Because if you started with concentration on sensation of the gross physical body, then afterwards that remains as a hangover even when you focus on emotions and mind. You may observe emotional sensations and try to separate, but because you fixated so much on the physical as the first stage of the practice, I find generally, and maybe it's limited to my experience, that those who have done that sort of practice tend to be stuck in the physical body. Whereas here the goal is to actually disengage from the physical, to let go and even forget all sensations of the physical and come fully into the subtle body awareness. So the common feature is this, some kind of up and down movement of awareness of sensation, but the focus of the sensation is totally different. So I would recommend not to mix the two. And just because two exercises have some common features does not mean they aim at the same or can lead to similar. It is very different. Of course, someone accidentally while doing the Vipassana might focus on the vital physical layers so much that they find themselves in it. That may happen. But for the bulk of the people, that does not happen because of the fixation on the body. So I think with this we have taken all the questions, and I want to focus now on the practice itself. Yes, IAC is International Academy of Consciousness, and you can see their website. I have for today given 3 links which you will find helpful for our purpose, and these links are First, the guided meditation for descent of peace, which is on this YouTube channel. The second one is Michael Raduga's instructions, which is titled How to Lucid Dream. And the third is his ebook, which also discusses out-of-body experience. Now, I must give a clear warning about Michael Raduga and distinguish something important. And this is the great criticism that Marc Oborn has of Michael Raduga, that Raduga mixes out-of-body experience with this projection, with remote viewing, and with other kinds of such perceptions. He blends them all into one go and mixes also lucid dreaming along with out-of-body. And Marc insists on making this difference, otherwise we can get stuck on one of these things and say that this is it and stop there. The out-of-body experience is fundamentally different from even lucid dreams, and we should not mix the two. So I'm a little wary of giving these links, but having given this background, I hope that you will use the links suitably. Why is this helpful? I found he gives very useful tips, because certain practices are common to lucid dreaming as well as out-of-body, and certain states and attitudes would be common, because finally you want to become conscious in what is otherwise a sleeping state. So for that purpose it's very useful. And in the book I found many useful hints and pointers of a very refined kind, very helpful nuances and suggestions, which I think would be useful. Once you understand that he's mixing everything, we should not mix everything. We should be very clear of what we want to do and what we are aiming at. So I now come to the actual practice which we will dwell upon, and I am not the expert in this field. I must say that. I have read books, I have had my own preliminary experiences, but to teach would require a certain stage of expertise which I do not have. But I still have the knowledge which is from the basic approach of the integral yoga, which gives access to the deeper and higher spiritual experiences equally. And the shift between this and out-of-body experience is just a tiny shift of focus. If you can go deep into your subtler gradations and layers of consciousness, even approach the psychic presence, if you can as if open upward and touch higher gradations of consciousness, all you need to shift now is to bring your focus into the vital body, and then do what is needed to make it separate from the physical. It comes down to just this much. So actually it is not so difficult, and we will look at certain things which will help you, and even as a form of practice. I'm going to draw upon, particularly for authority, from two names, Marc Oborn and Geminous, who is also right now on the chat box with us. And I have also requested both of them to come online and interact with all of us who would be interested in this, and who might have questions deriving from their practice. And they've both agreed on different days, of course. So very likely it will be on the 1st of June that we will have an interaction with Marc, and on the 8th of June an interaction with Geminous. But what I would like to suggest is that beginning today, for those of you who are interested, to take up this practice with a certain clarity of focus and persistence, so that by the time we have those interactions, either you will have certain useful experiences to report, or you'll have questions deriving from your practices and experiences which they could address much more directly. So this is what we will focus on now. First, I want to take a very helpful suggestion, and I'm putting it in the context of the integral yoga. Geminous being very much in the alignment with the vocabulary of Sri Aurobindo, I'm drawing a lot on his text and his communications. But remember Sri Aurobindo's text we read last time, where he says the mind should be tranquilized, the desire soul should be liberated from its insistence. Third thing he says, the veil of absorption in the outer consciousness should be broken. And we realize that the inner senses are the source of the outer senses, so as we withdraw, we are centered in the inner consciousness. If you understand this, and if you put this into practice, you have everything you need to get into the out-of-body state. But still, I'm going to read from a comment which Geminous made, which I found extremely helpful to go to the root of the process itself. And he said, let me see if I can find this text. He says, he puts it like this: answer the question as to how you would. Oh, okay, let me go back. Remember, if the body is not relaxed as well as the vital and mental, one does not go consciously out of body. So answer the question as to how you would do that, and you will have found your way to OBE, conscious out of body experience. And then he says, I have found with myself and students that such things as seeing yourself going down an elevator, pulling yourself out of the body with an imaginary rope, etc., does not work, as there is too much glue with all those vital mental acrobatics. So here is your key. How would your body be relaxed? Physical, vital, mental, entirely, and your physical body go into sleep state while your awareness stays conscious. You do that and you have your outer body experience. So again, I'm looking for the text which from Geminous' observation. Okay, this is what he wrote. Most of the glues are psychological, the thing which binds you to the physical. Really, a training course is needed to succeed on a reasonable time frame. But the one simply stated issue is, how does a person allow their physical body, mind, to enter the sleep state while maintaining conscious, unbroken awareness in the vital? Answer that for yourself and you will go far very quickly. So the key is this. And the mother described it in these steps, which I will get the text probably next time or another time. She put it in this way. First, you must make your entire awareness completely relaxed. Your body should be totally relaxed like a rag. Now, many of you would remember the description mother gives of how to go to sleep, making the body like a rag. Literally, part by part, you relax until there is nothing, no tension of any kind left. Extend this from the physical body into the emotions and then into the mind. Your emotions must be totally still, relaxed. Even a slight ripple of worry or bother or thinking about something is enough to create a perturbation which will act like a glue. Or your mind to be completely relaxed then, and in all the parts. Right? It often happens that there's a little bit of tension in some part of the emotions in a part of the body. You must consciously relax, relax, relax everywhere. Make this first your priority. Fixate on this state of total relaxation while maintaining awareness. Next, we want to bring it to a state where the glue which binds you, the stickiness which holds you together, so to say, from the mental vital bodies into the gross physical, that should be relaxed. If you could access that layer also in your relaxation, you would be able to just let go and drift off. And that would be how you will have the mastery of being able to go out at will. But for the moment, we don't have that. So we start with catching the body at a time when this glue is the weakest. And this is the common experience everywhere for all, that this glue is weakest in the later part of night. So as you go to sleep, you are somewhat tense, you drift, and there's an oscillation, each time going deeper and deeper and deeper. And there's a time when, let's say 3/4 of the way down into the sleep or halfway down the sleep, you've gone very deep. After that, the still deeper states are so deep that the glue is so weak. At that moment, all you need to do is intend and you drift off literally. And we all come to that degree of freedom from the stickiness to the physical body, all of us, as we approach the latest phase of the night. So the commonest method taught And Marc refers to this very highly, and in the communication I had with Geminous also, he also recommended this as a point, a time when one can do this very easily, where the form of practice is, you set an alarm to wake up, let's say at about 3 a.m. You wake up and bring yourself fully into waking state. Some of them even sip a cup of tea just to make sure you're fully in waking state. And then you go right back to sleep. Why is this important? Because the part of your awareness which would normally be half drowsy is brought to full waking state. Now understand the principle, and you can skip a lot of this in between thing. Once you have done that, now you go back, your body is tired and everything else is already on the drifting movement down into deep sleep. So now when you try to go to sleep, all the rest quickly sinks, and this part, normally you would still go to sleep, but this part is already half awake. Now what you do next, which is the most important part, you've gone to sleep with an intention, and we'll come to the intention shortly. You've gone to sleep with an intention. As you wake up, let's say an hour down, you will wake up spontaneously. In the moment when you wake up, your glue is already very weak. That's when you will apply the intention to drift off. And if it does not happen, you will go right back to sleep and wait for the next bump, which will be still lower. And at that moment when you wake up, the glue will be even weaker. And at that point, you will put the intention to drift off. And if it does not happen, you wait for the next. And generally, we are told, if you persist in this, within a few days, you will get an experience of being out of the body. Now, this is the basic framework of practice. We'll go into specifics of it. The specifics of this first begin with the preparation that we would have to make, which begins in the daytime, remember. So, I'm looking at the vocabulary that Geminous has used. Point 1, he says, first he says, good, strong faith. Second, a clear aspiration, intention in this area. Now, both of these words you will find very common in the integral yoga. The faith here is extremely important, because at the end of the day, if you have within you a doubt, hesitation, fear, or whatever, or even a negative faith, oh, it's going to be difficult, that will reflect in the deeper layers. So somewhere within you, you have to bring yourself or find in you this conviction, this is easy. The point which was made by Marc repeatedly in his conference, he said, it's a skill. It's a skill as ordinary as learning to row a boat or thread a needle or whatever it is you want to do. Pick any skill, it's a skill. And it does not require any specialized spiritual development or intelligence or other capacity. It's a skill, and treat it as that. And as a skill, anybody can have the experience. Now, the things which you may develop in time is your capacity to use the outer body state to go into higher and other ranges, or to be able to recall more when you return, and so on. Those things will follow later. We don't worry about this. The intention right now is to experience going out of the body in your vital body. It's a skill. Everybody can do it, and it is extremely simple if you follow this pattern, where already your body is in a state where it can separate easily. You have to do nothing. You have to develop nothing. You have to catch the wave, so to say, catch the occasion, and you'll find it easy. So this faith you must deeply embed within yourself. Sometimes it helps to read literature. So if you read, for example, Marc's book, or if you read from the links I've given of Raduga's text, as you read, work on this idea that you have full access to this, and it's just a question of experimenting a little bit, and it will happen. And with it, bring a deeper faith that finally, remember what I said earlier, who decides? Your own higher consciousness, your own higher self. When it chooses, it pulls you, it allows you, it takes you out, it wakes you up in the middle of sleep, in your subtle body, etc. It pulls you back when it needs to. Trust that and ask that. So one of the forms in which you would do this would be to ask the mother, or ask your own higher self the central being, whatever vocabulary you use, the one who is awake while the rest of you sleeps. Ask that to give you this experience, to lead you through, to guide you through this process, etc. And the deep conviction that whatever is chosen by it, there's nothing that can stop. So this faith, and then a very clear aspiration and intention in this. And this intention you build during the day and into the night. So even if you can in the middle of the day, multiple times you will remind yourself, recall, this is your intention, this is what you will experience tonight or in the next few days. And it will be easy, it will be spontaneous, it will be effortless. So one of the observations which I think it is Raduga who makes, everybody who's had the out-of-body experience, they're asked to describe what they had without using the words easy, spontaneous or natural. And they cannot. Because in fact when the experience happens, it is easy, spontaneous and natural. Without using those words, you cannot describe the experience as it happens. And so fix this in your mind as you read these texts and allow this intention to settle. One of the suggestions would be also to not only remind yourself to write it down as an intention, to look at that intention and fixate it within you. What we discussed right at the beginning in a different context of a different question, you do that so that you wake up at night in the out-of-body state, or as you wake up with that intention, you are conscious at the moment of waking that this is what you want to do. So if when you dip into that phase when the glue is weakest, without any other method, just on the moment of waking up, if you remember to drift off, you have had your out-of-body experience. It is as simple as that. The key is then to remember at the moment of waking and not get into some movement or agitation of thought or emotion. So if you have done this in the daytime, you'll find this happening spontaneously as you wake up and you'll remember. For those of you who have already practiced remembering dreams, you will remember what this feels like. As you're waking up, you're conscious that you're waking up and you remember what it is you want to do and you catch the wave and you drift. Or as it was for the dream, you catch the thread and you hold. But it's the same experience. So third thing which he is recommending is regular daily nightly practice. Do this every day. Now Raduga recommends doing this not every day but 2 or 3 times in a week. The reason being, if in the beginning you make a mistake and slip into a habit, the frustration builds up, the wrong idea that it's difficult builds up, or a wrong habit in your practice now becomes entrenched. So his recommendation to try once, let it go for 2 days, and then try again and then let it go for 2 days is intended so that you don't repeat the error of the past. And maybe the second time you do it will be different. But if you're conscious of the key, and the key is what we are discussing, this total relaxation, and I'll come to this again shortly. If you're conscious of this, then you can actually do this every day. And then the persistence builds up and makes easy the experience. So every day, all day is a preparation, and nights of course too. That's his point number 4. So before going to sleep, you will remind yourself of this intention. You will put into practice the VELO method, and then the specific thing which you will do at the moment when you wake up. At the moment when you wake up, you will choose to drift off as if floating away. So the way Marc describes it, he says, you remember what it feels like to drift. You remember what it feels like to ski. You remember what it feels like to float. Or you just think of what it feels like to float. You don't make effort. You allow it to happen. This is extremely important because any effort creates the tension you want to do without tension. So I'll give my own experience at some point when I was attempting this. I was in that state where I was aware quite distinctly in the vital subtle body. And I was on the brink, tending to fall asleep, so holding the point of awareness. And at that point, suddenly I remembered that there was something on the floor which I wish I had checked. And then I found myself spontaneously rising up to check it. and I realized I had risen up in my subtle body. And the surprise of it brought the consciousness right back. Interesting. I thought of doing that and the movement started. Unlike the physical body, or unlike the efforts you need to make in the physical body where there's a tension involved, you have to be tensionless in this. So the methods they recommend, I think it is there in Raduga's book, he describes 2 or 3 things you do successively. One is immediately you try to float away and not more than 3 seconds. If it does not happen, you switch modes. Now you try to turn as if rolling to the left. 3 seconds. If it does not happen, you turn and roll to the right. If that does not happen, well, you slide horizontally. You do 3 or 4 variations. Those are described in his ebook. Each effort only 3 seconds at most. Anything more and you'll tend to make tense because you make effort. The secret is learning how to make effort without tensing. Or rather, drop the word effort and replace by the word intention or essential or pure will. This is what you want, and let it happen. So if you catch this, then you can repeat every day and there's no difficulty, the exercise. But if this does not happen, you try 2, 3, 4 attempts, you go right back to sleep. That's the recommendation, and this is the method in the IAC as well as Raduga, where it's described in detail. You go back to sleep, maybe you have not hit the lowest point where the glue is thinnest. Next point, you wake up after an hour, you do this immediately. On waking up, you float off. 3 seconds, you roll left. 3 seconds, you roll right. But generally, what we are told is within the first 2 days, or sometimes in the very first day, in the second or third attempt, you'll find it happening. Again, you don't do more than 3 or 4 attempts. If that does not work, you go right back to sleep. But with the intention that you will catch the next wave, the next time that you wake up, you will catch the moment where you wake up. So I'm describing this intention and the fact of remembering the intention when you wake up. This is going to be your key. That's why the work during the day, the one-pointed intention, focus, but in a state of relaxation. So I'm coming now to point number 5 from Geminous, where he says, studying up on Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's delineation of their sleep yoga is also key. At least I now insist upon this for others as a safe, sound and safe preparation. So yes, read about this, how to make your sleep conscious, etc. Things we've already spoken of. But all of this will help to orient your intention that you want this to happen at night. So at night before you go to sleep, you will practice this. Intention of floating, intention of rolling left, right, drifting. And then again stop, relax. Again you will practice this with the intention that you will remember to do this at the moment of waking up. And you do all this before sleeping. You imprint this as an intention. You remember the will, the word we used of will before, but in a very relaxed way. And then you practice the velo followed by this intention. Practice the velo followed by this intention multiple times over a few days if needed, or in the daytime several times, and then at night before going to sleep again. So you're habituating your consciousness for this to happen spontaneously. And then you go to sleep with that intention, with that aspiration. Now at the moment of going to sleep, you will consciously relax all 3 things. First, the physical body, like a limp rag, the phrase Mother uses. Then observe your emotional consciousness, life force, vitality. If you have done the velo, you're conscious in the in the vital parts, or even in the subtle physical, wherever it is. Relax each of those layers. Then all the way into mind, and then mind awareness, which is across the body, in your entire subtle body. Everything you make as still as possible. To this, Marc adds a very important guideline where he says momentarily you detach yourself from everything to do with earth, life and things and people. All the connections with human beings, all the reality bubble of your belief systems, all the basic needs of your body and its instincts, all your beliefs, opinions, evidences, certainties, whatever things you have, you let it all go. You must become entirely centered in this, as if there is nothing else that exists. Now I'm going to describe the next step. When you practice, After the initial relaxation, when you've got to this complete relaxation state, you're going to do the velo, which is to shift your awareness into the subtle body. So if you have felt already with the descent of peace your subtle physical, you can start with that. Otherwise, simply bringing this awareness as it sweeps through, but not on gross body, on the denser layer around. You may not feel it right now, but start with recalling it and sensing there. So you put your intention on the layer around, the thick range around you, not the gross body. Remember, you want to forget your gross body. You want to be in the subtle body. So you start with what they call energy body, vital body, awareness around you of the energy, swollen, large, around you, wrapping and sweeping through. Do this a few times until you build it, until it becomes dense. Now at this point, something begins to happen spontaneously. You begin to feel this vital body more vividly, more intensely. And often along with this, for many people, there is a sensation or a sound of a certain intensity. Now this may vary to each person. If it happens to you, catch the wave and allow it to grow. If it doesn't happen to you, you may simply feel an intensity of energy, vividness, density, heat, warmth, intense energy of some kind. Whatever it is you experience, allow it to grow. So the key here is, when this starts happening, many people get afraid. For some, it is even heard as a sound, like a whooshing, buzzing, electric vibrations, various ways people describe. For some, it's none of these. It's just warmth and intensity of heat or energy. Whatever you experience, do not worry. When you begin to experience this happening, and it comes with this dense, widened, subtle body sensation, when it begins to happen, encourage it, allow it, dwell in it, let it grow. And at that moment, you let go, literally allow the physical body, its awareness, its sensations to dissolve and to cease to exist to your awareness. Putting all of your attention into this. Stay in it, let it grow, enjoy this state. This is a very important point. You have to enjoy this state rather than experiencing fear or discomfort or whatever it is. So there's a buzzing, expansion, vibration, whatever you're feeling. This is what you want to dwell on. Oh, this is so good. Allow it to happen. And at that point you reach a gradation where you're entirely aware of your subtle body, and you do not think of the physical anymore. It ceases to be. Literally to your consciousness it is dissolved. No sensation, no awareness of it. You stay in this and you drift off or turn or whatever it is. Allow it to happen again. The subsequent movement, as there is a drifting away, is then to go as far away as you can from the physical body. There is a range very close to the physical where the attraction is strong and one tends to be pulled back easily. You must cross the threshold of that range as quickly as possible. So your intention should be simply to drift away and away and away, as far away as you want. And you turn your attention, your mind itself, away to the things which you want to go towards, not body. Because if you turn attention to body, you come right back. So in the beginning, you make this. Later, as the skill grows, you will not need to do many of these things. But initially, put your attention on where you want to go, drifting away, and keep that focus. So this vibratory phase is a critical point of transition. And it is that through which we pass into becoming conscious in this out-of-body state. So Trinetra has asked, can we have the text from Geminous? This was something which he wrote in an email to me, but he says, I'll be delighted to share the skills and experience to develop conscious OBE. So we will have him. He's also made another comment. Vipassana does not contribute much to conscious OBE. It is helpful for self-knowledge and conscious shifts, but can confuse the work of conscious OBE because the focus is quite different, as I pointed out. So here we have something which forms a basis for practice, which I would suggest for all those of you who are interested to immediately take up. But I come to one last point, which was in Geminous's notes. Number 6, he says, handwritten dream recording each morning is essential to strengthen the subtle and light bodies, as well as trying to remember the conscious OBE lessons. And then he says the above 6 points are key. So if you like, I can cut and paste this part from which I read into the chat box. So you have the text. I think. I don't know why it's not going through. But I will put it in the description later, so you can see it in the description. Oh, it says it's too long. Okay. Let me then clip it into pieces. There's only so much that the chat box allows, unfortunately. So I'm putting it in 4 pieces. Okay, so it's there. I'll also put it in the description box. To summarize now, key points. First, remember, you have to build during the day a certain intention that you will hold and put into practice and create a rhythm of the practice so that more and more this will pop up into the night. And so, and practice at the same time the dream recall. This will help to build the continuity. If you have already built a basic spiritual purification, integration of your life around your psychic aspiration, all of these will go a great way to not only make this experience more spontaneous and easy, but also safe when you are going through various experiences. Then, before sleeping, you are going to go into complete relaxation of the physical, emotional, and mental layers and go through this multiple times. Remove every little thing. Remember what it feels like at the moment when you wake up from very deep sleep. That's the depth of relaxation you must have, and train yourself to be able to enter this. And if you can do this, then you can even do in the middle of the day, you can take your body to that state of relaxation and be able to separate. But initially we won't attempt that. We will use the opportunity of the early mornings for this purpose. Second, you will practice the velo method as a way of shifting awareness into the subtle body, and then practice the movement of drifting off, rolling over, etc. And instill this as a habit in the consciousness. One of the things which Raduga says is you should do this mechanically. Don't do it with effort, do it mechanically. The result is you let go of the tension that comes in effort. You will notice one of the first things you do when you try to float away, you'll notice somewhere inside a part of you will tense. Sometimes it's a physical part of the body which becomes tense, or some part of your energy becomes tense because you're trying to float away. Relax and let go. You don't try. You allow it. You intend it. So this is a skill you will develop very quickly if you're conscious of this point. The moment you make an effort to roll, you will tend to become tense, which is the reason why we have to keep trying. At some point it becomes so mechanical and boring that you stop trying and you just do it. And that's when it happens. So get yourself to that state where you just do it. No effort, no tension of effort rather, just allowing. So work on this. Focus on the buzzing experience as you're, after the velo, as you come into this state of the subtle body awareness. And then float, tilt, roll, move, drift, etc. This state of vibratory sensation, let's say in the vital body, you become familiar with, you become habituated to, you enjoy, and then you roll, you drift, etc. So during this vibratory state, you must maintain a total calm, no agitation of emotion, no excitation, and simply turn your attention to drift away from, to drift far, to go elsewhere. If you like, you pre-set a location just outside your house, on the road, on the terrace, or some place which you're familiar with, where you've already been. Place that as an intention, as a direction already, so that you don't think of going away from something, you think of going towards something. And so use this as a starting point. You'll get a lot of hints and tips in the text which I've shared from Raduga's book, the link which is there, and I believe that will be of help also. And Geminous is saying something more. So Sumana asks, what is rolling over? So let's say your physical body is lying down and your subtle body is now attached to it. Once you feel your subtle body as if widened, enlarged, you kind of roll over sideways, as if you're floating off, like a boat rolling, you just roll over. So that movement of rolling over, or drifting up, or sliding forward. There are various movements which you can take up. Just the intending. Geminous also says, add this, while doing the night sleep waking practice, keep the mind gently without stress or effort on the top of the head or upon the third eye area between the eyes. This allows the body to fall asleep while the mind vital remains conscious. So this is another very important key. You have to let your body go to sleep, but your awareness remaining. And the point where you can hold most easily is generally either third eye or top of head, depending on what you're habituated to. So again, if you practice this during the day, during your concentration, meditation, hold your awareness here, hold it above there, to the point where you lose awareness of the physical body. You'll have the experience of what it's like to be in one-pointed awareness, free of body. Get familiar with these things, and it'll all help in this particular form of exercise. So even as you drift into sleep, you may choose to hold attention there and let the body go to sleep, and your awareness stays here, and you find yourself drifting off spontaneously. For some, it might be just as easy as this. So you have several things you can do. I would suggest simply start doing, even if you do it mechanically, and especially if you do it mechanically habitually, you might find much more easy the spontaneous experience. I think this is all I wanted to share for now. Yes, one more point Geminous has made. It is skillful to have a clear plan for when you go consciously out of body. Yes, drift far away from the physical body with your plan on what to do when you're flying out of body. So this should be an intention already present. And if possible, program this from the daytime also. When I go out of body, first thing I will do is go there, go to my terrace, go to that garden, go to that park, space that you're familiar, which you feel comfortable going to. Or if you want to do a distance, you think of the Matri Mandir or something like that. Or some place which is familiar and comfortable for you to immediately focus upon. And so the habit will take you straight there. And this will be the way to make it most easy and spontaneous. So I will suggest for all of us to put this into practice over the next 2 weeks. And as you note down, whatever experiences you have, note, observe, encourage, allow the experiences to grow. And on next time, we will take up many questions which are pending regarding things we've already discussed. And perhaps also if some other questions come up. But on the 1st of June, we will have an interaction with Marc, who will also join us here. And on the 8th of June with Geminous, who will join us here. So the next 3 sessions we have reserved for this topic, but now focusing almost entirely on the conscious out-of-body experience. So let's take a moment to center ourselves in this aspiration, in this intention, and in invoking the help of the Divine Mother, of our own higher central being, self, consciousness, that we may be given this experience. Now, how far we choose to develop it is something we can decide later, but to have this experience at least once is certainly extremely valuable and will free you from many other things and will be extremely helpful in the spiritual sadhana. And it is for this that we will aim for in our effort. So let's hold this intention and aspiration. May the Divine Mother lead our steps to our deepest and highest spiritual fulfillment. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much. Very beautiful session.